This is Land of Havilah, 2 Kings 14. At the time Elisha died, Joash was king in Israel. Meanwhile in Judah, verse 1, in the 2nd year of Joash, the son of Joahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. Comment: This is Amaziah of Judah. In the history of Israel and Judah, he was the only king by that name, but if it sounds familiar, it's because of the two Ahaziahs and the Azariah coming later. Amaziah's name means Yah or Yahweh is mighty, Amaziah. As a memory trick, we can think of him as Amazing Amaziah. Let's see how amazing he was or wasn't. Verse 2. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoiadin of Jerusalem. Comment: In the history of the kings of Israel and Judah, there were 3 kings who had foreign mothers, and those kings were unfaithful to Yahweh in all cases. 1 Kings 14:21, 1 Kings 22:52, and 2 Kings 3:2. So it's a good thing that Amaziah's mother was from Jerusalem. Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign, old enough to know the ropes a little bit. His father from chapter 12 was Joash of Judah, the boy king who forsook Yahweh, then assassinated some of the priests for calling him out. Joash in turn was assassinated himself, quote, for the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest, 2 Chronicles 24:25. We might suspect that the priesthood was behind Joash's assassination, but the actual assassins had foreign mothers, 2 Chronicles 24:26, which meant it was unlikely they were priests, Leviticus 21:14. Still, Amaziah might suspect the priesthood was behind his father's assassination, so as he's taking the throne, he has to sort all that out and decide whom he needs to kill, lest he be killed like his father. At least he must deal with the triggermen, so to speak. Verse 3. He did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, yet not like David his father. He did according to all that Joash his father had done. Comment: He did right, meaning he was generally upstanding in respect to Yahweh, but not fully devoted like David was. He did according to all that his father Joash did. His father went from good to bad, and Amaziah is going to follow that basic pattern. Verse 4. However, the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense in the high places. As soon as the kingdom was established in his hand, he killed his servants who had slain the king his father. Comment: When he took the throne, like any king, Yahweh had to establish it for him, meaning Yahweh had to keep his enemies at bay and lend him the authority he needed to rule, which he did. When he was firmly established, he killed Josachar and Jehozabad, who had slain his father, 2 Kings 12:21. These were the men with foreign mothers who did the actual killing and were unlikely to be priests. Verse 6. But the children of the murderers he didn't put to death, according to that which was written in the law of Moses, as Yahweh commanded, saying, The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, nor the children be put to death for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin. Comment: Amaziah didn't put the sons of the murderers to death, which was an act of faith on his part, in accordance with the law of Moses. Amaziah is taking a chance that the sons could bear a grudge and come around one day for revenge, but in faith he left them alone, and he left the priests alone also. On the foreign front, verse 7, he killed 10,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt and took Selah by war and called its name Joktheel to this day. Comment: He won victory over Edom, which was the country south of the Dead Sea. He fought them in the valley of Salt, which is the Dead Sea Valley, and at Selah, which simply means rock. He changed the name of Selah to Joktheel, which means subdued by God. There's more in 2 Chronicles chapter 25. For the Edomite campaign, Amaziah organized an army of 300,000 men of Judah, plus he hired 100,000 mercenaries from Israel. But a prophet told him to send the Israelites home because Yahweh wasn't with the Israelites, and if he would take them to Edom, Yahweh would be against him. Amaziah did as the prophet said and sent the Israelites home before the war, but the Israelite mercenaries were so offended they attacked some of the cities of Judah on their way back to Israel, killed 3,000, and took plunder. Then also in 2 Chronicles chapter 25, Amaziah did an amazingly bad thing after he defeated Edom. After giving Yahweh credit for defeating the gods of Edom, he brought those gods of Edom home with him back to Jerusalem, set them up, bowed, and burned incense to them. Yahweh sent a prophet to rebuke him for it, but he told the prophet, "Stop it or I'll kill you," 2 Chronicles 25:16. But the prophet didn't stop right then. He said, quote, "I know that God has determined to destroy you because you have done this and have not listened to my counsel," end quote. So then Amaziah was on his own after that to see what his foreign gods from Edom could do for him, with Yahweh being against him. Verse 8. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, "Come, let's look one another in the face." Comment: Amaziah sent a message to Joash, king of Israel, and challenged him to war. No doubt he's angry that the 100,000 Israelite mercenaries looted Judah on the way out. Joash isn't any pushover. He's the one that struck Syria 3 times and subdued them, according to the arrow prophecy of Elisha. But Amaziah is full of himself after his big victory in Edom, 2 Kings 14:10. Joash of Israel responded, verse 9. Joash the king of Israel sent to Amaziah king of Judah, saying, "The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, 'Give your daughter to my son as wife.' Then a wild animal that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled down the thistle. You have indeed struck Edom, and your heart has lifted you up. Enjoy the glory of it and stay home, for why should you meddle to your harm, that you fall, even you and Judah with you?" Comment: Joash says, "I'm a cedar tree and you're a little thorny plant on the ground. You're no match for me. Careful somebody doesn't step on you." Verse 11. But Amaziah would not listen. So Jehoash king of Israel went up, and he and Amaziah king of Judah looked one another in the face at Beth-Shemesh, which belongs to Judah. Comment: They looked one another in the face at Beth-Shemesh, meaning they lined up for war 14 miles west of Jerusalem. Verse 12. Judah was defeated by Israel, and each man fled to his tent. Comment: Each man of Judah fled to his tent, but not Amaziah, because Joash captured Amaziah coming up. Verse 13. Jehoash king of Israel took Amaziah king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, at Beth-Shemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. He took all the gold and silver, and all the vessels that were found in Yahweh's house, and in the treasuries of the king's house, the hostages also, and returned to Samaria. Comment: Joash came to Jerusalem and trampled it like a thorny plant. He tore down 600 feet of the city wall, and took all the gold and silver out of the temple and palace, all the treasures. This was what the people of Judah had donated for temple repairs in the previous generation, dropping it into the box with the hole bored in it. The priests and Levites must have hidden the ark, because long after this time it was still in the temple, 2 Chronicles 35:3. Also, Joash took hostages back to Samaria. Hostages is literally sons of pledges in Hebrew. Ideally for Joash, these would have been sons of the most powerful men in Judah, so that he could use them as an insurance policy to extract a pledge from Judah, in effect, that they wouldn't threaten him anymore. He could threaten to kill the hostages if Judah ever bothered him again. Verse 15. Now the rest of the acts of Joash, which he did, and his might, and how he fought with Amaziah king of Judah, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Jehoash slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son reigned in his place. Amaziah the son of Joash king of Judah lived after the death of Jehoash the son of Jehoahaz king of Israel 15 years. Now the rest of the acts of Amaziah, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? Comment: Amaziah had the good sense not to attack Joash again. Joash eventually died, and Amaziah outlived him by 15 years. Amaziah would have lived longer, except, verse 19, they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and killed him there. They brought him on horses, and he was buried at Jerusalem with his fathers in David's city. Comment: The conspiracy began to form against Amaziah from the time he turned away from Yahweh, 2 Chronicles 25:27, which means it was brewing for at least 15 years. So like his father, he was assassinated, his father for turning away from Yahweh and killing the priests, and he for turning away from Yahweh and committing the unforced error of challenging Israel to war, losing, getting Jerusalem ransacked, and being forced to give up hostages. Yahweh established Amaziah on the throne in the beginning, but he forsook Yahweh, and Yahweh eventually de-established his throne. Not that the people who assassinated him were doing the bidding of Yahweh. They should have taken cue from David and refused to strike Yahweh's anointed, 1 Samuel 24:6. That was the amazing rise and fall of Amaziah, verse 21. All the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in the place of his father Amaziah. Comment one more note about Amaziah, verse 22. He built Elath and restored it to Judah. After that, the king slept with his fathers. Comment, Elath was the port on the Gulf of Aqaba on the south side of Edom. With Edom in submission, Amaziah took Elath and built it up. Now turning attention to Israel, verse 23. In the 15th year of Amaziah the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam the son of Joash, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria for 41 years. Comment, we already learned in the last chapter that Jeroboam II took the throne in Israel after his father Joash. He inherited a pretty good situation because his father struck the Syrians 3 times and, quote, recovered the cities of Israel, 2 Kings 13:25. But, verse 24, he did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight. He didn't depart from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he made Israel to sin. He restored the border of Israel from the entrance of Hamath to the sea of the Arabah, according to Yahweh, the God of Israel's word, which he spoke by his servant Jonah the son of Amittai, the prophet, who was from Gath-Hepher. Comment, the prophet Jonah arose in Samaria during the reign of Jeroboam II. This is the same Jonah that was swallowed by the great fish, Jonah the son of Amittai. He was from Gath-Hepher, about 3 miles from the future site of Nazareth. Jonah assured Jeroboam that he would be victorious from the entrance of Hamath, which was the valley of Lebanon, to the sea of the Arabah, which was the Dead Sea, and he was. Neither Jeroboam II, his father, or his grandfather have turned to Yahweh, but Yahweh has been putting Israel on the military uptrend ever since the grandfather Jehoahaz begged. Since then, Israel has risen from the dust, as explained coming up, verse 26. For Yahweh saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter for all, slave and free, and there was no helper for Israel. Yahweh didn't say that he would blot out the name of Israel from under the sky, but he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam the son of Joash. Now the rest of the acts of Jeroboam and all that he did, and his might, how he fought and how he recovered Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah for Israel, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Comment, Jeroboam II even conquered Damascus, the capital of Syria, which Israel only briefly conquered about 250 years before under David, 2 Samuel 8:6. Solomon lost it 1 generation later, 1 Kings 11:24 and 25. Other than that brief period, Israel never held Damascus until Jeroboam II took it. So this is amazing success for a king that wasn't devoted to Yahweh. But Yahweh was just being plain merciful. He was merciful, verse 26 said, because he, quote, saw the affliction of Israel, that it was very bitter for all, slave and free, and there was no helper for Israel, end quote. So Yahweh broke in to be that helper, though they continued in the sin of Jeroboam. In addition to the prophet Jonah, the prophet Amos arose in the time of Jeroboam II, Amos 1:1. He was from Tekoa of Judah. He came up to Bethel in Israel, where one of the golden calves had been set up for a long time, as put there by Jeroboam I. There Amos prophesied against Israel and against Jeroboam II. He rebuked their sins and predicted that Yahweh would rise up against the house of Jeroboam with the sword, Amos 7:9. One of the priests in Bethel, a priest of the golden calf, notified Jeroboam that Amos was prophesying against him and against Israel. In the message to Jeroboam II, the false priest said, quote, the land is not able to bear all his words, for Amos says, Jeroboam will die by the sword, and Israel will surely be led away captive, Amos 7:11. Amos didn't record any response to the message. The prophet Hosea also arose in the time of Jeroboam II. He said, quote, in a little while I will cause the kingdom of the house of Israel to cease, Hosea 1:4. Hosea ended the book with some long-range predictions. He said, quote, For the children of Israel shall live many days without a king, and without prince, and without sacrifice, and without sacred stone, and without ephod or idols. Hosea 3:4. This describes an unspecified period of time without altars or priests at all, whether they be to Yahweh or to idols, almost an atheistic period. But in the next verse, in the end, quote, "Afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek Yahweh their God and David their king, and shall come with trembling to Yahweh and to his blessings in the last days." Hosea 3:5. Obviously, David the king was already long dead, and as we can piece together now, Yahweh was talking about the son of David, the Christ, who would arise. Yahweh would finally bring the nation, quote, "trembling to Yahweh and to his blessings in the last days," end quote. This must be the time of which Paul also spoke, quote, "all Israel will be saved," Romans 11:26. So in this time of relentless spiritual rebellion in Israel, Yahweh has already made plans to tear the whole thing down and eventually build it up again. Verse 29, "Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son reigned in his place." Comment 2 Kings 15 is next at landofhavilah.net, 2 Kings 15. This is the map of 2 Kings 14. The scale of miles is always the Dead Sea, which is 10 miles across. Amaziah reigned in Jerusalem. He defeated the Edomites, which were south of the Dead Sea. He took Elath on the Gulf of Aqaba, which was a port that gave access to the Red Sea and potentially to the Indian Ocean farther south. He met Joash of Israel at Beth Shemesh for war. Joash defeated him and took him to Jerusalem and raided it. When the conspirators were on Amaziah's trail, he fled about 25 miles southwest to Lachish, a city of Judah, but they caught up with him there and killed him. Jeroboam II arose in Samaria and further subdued the Syrians. He took the land all the way up to Hamath, which is modern Hama, Syria, including the entrance to Hamath, which was the valley of Lebanon. He took even Damascus itself and took all the way south to the Dead Sea. His kingdom measured an amazing 250 miles north to south. All this after the Israel of his grandfather Jehoahaz was reduced to dust. Jonah the prophet who spoke to Jeroboam II was from Gath-Hepher, next to what would become Nazareth. 2 Kings 15 is next.